The first thing to do in order to use R, we have to go to a browser and download it. So we'll go into Chrome and we'll visit R's website, which is r-project.org. This takes you up to a website that does indeed look like it's from the early 90s, but it has everything we need right in there. So in order to download R, there's all sorts of information up here that says everything we need. Stuff about the contributors to R, screenshots, a little explanation about R. But what we really care about right now is just downloading the installer. So for that we come to CRAN, which stands for the Comprehensive R Archive Network. We come here and we see there's CRAN mirrors. These are basically computers around the world that let you download R from the nearest location. It's a way of making things run a little more smoothly. So, situated here in New York, the closest place we have is the Carnegie Mellon Stat Lab. We come here, click on that, and it takes us to the mirror at Carnegie Mellon. And this brings up a few possibilities for downloading. The first option is for Linux, then Mac, and Windows. Choose the operating system you're using. For Windows and Mac OS, it's roughly the same, but for Linux, you can do it from the command line using apt-get, for instance, if you're on Ubuntu. I'm using a Windows machine, so we'll come click Download R for Windows. And here you have even more options. R tools is necessary if you're going to be building your own package using C++. We don't need to worry about that for now. And we have the contrib build here, but again, that's more than we need to get started. All we need is base. So we will go ahead and click on base, which will bring us up to the screen to download the actual installer. As of the filming of this video, the most recent version of R is 3.0.1. So we will go ahead and download that. Save it anywhere on your computer. For now, I'll save it to my desktop, and we'll just click save. It will begin downloading. It's 52 megabytes, so depending on your internet speed, it'll take varying amounts of time. So now that it's done downloading, we will go to our desktop. Just like any other installer, we could run this just by double-clicking, but due to some administrative issues, we want to right-click and click Run as Administrator. This will give the installer more permissions to set up files where they are needed. So I'll click Run as Administrator. The first question it asks is what language would you like to install it in. The default is English, but you have many other languages. We will go ahead and use English and click OK. First screen it pulls up is just telling you, welcome to the setup. Go ahead and click Next. And then there's the license. This is free and open source software, but there is still legal information here, and you might want to peruse this. It is under the GNU General Public License, and there's lots of information about what you can do. I will leave you on your own to read this. So go ahead and click Next. Now here's where you have to really pay attention. The R core team is very specific in that R should be installed in a folder with no spaces in the name. Even though half the time the default they give you is in program files which has a space. So we should choose a different folder. So you can go ahead and click Browse and find another folder. Now I personally like using the Documents folder. So on Windows 7, that is under Users, then your name, and then you scroll down to see My Documents. Now it might look like there's a space in the name My Documents, but that's just the front-facing name. Underneath it, there's no space, and I'll show that in a little bit. So, since I have many versions of R running, I like having within Documents another folder called R. And right in here, you can see I have many versions installed from 2.13, 2.14, 2.15, and 3.0.0. So I'll click on R so we can go ahead and install 3.0.1. So when I click OK, we can see that actually it's called Documents, not My Documents. So we're good, no spaces in the path now. So we can click Next. And now we're given more options. The core files and message translations you want to leave. The only real decision you have is whether to install 32-bit, 64-bit, or both. This used to matter a lot more back when not all processors were 64-bit processors. And when you have a 64-bit processor, you can store more data and work on larger data. And since big data is so popular right now, you're going to want to use 64-bit. The option whether to keep 32-bit is if you might need it for some legacy software or for some other reason. Doesn't really make a difference, but you definitely want 64-bit. So make sure that's checked and come click Next. Now, there are all sorts of options you can specify, but since we will be using RStudio as a front end, we're going to go ahead and just accept the defaults and not worry about any of those. So after you click Next, it gives the option of creating a Start menu folder. Might as well keep it. Click Next. I personally don't want a desktop icon, so I'm going to get rid of it. I do like the idea of saving the version number in the registry and associating R with .r data files, which we learn about in a later chapter. So clicking Next begins the installation process. It is a fairly quick process depending on the type of computer you have, and this gets everything you need to use R. When the installation is finished, it tells you it's done, and we can just click Finish. Now that it is installed, we can go ahead and see what R is like. Come to Start, and it's already there for us. This is the 32-bit version. So we will go to All Programs, scroll down until we see R, and then we will choose R x64 3.0.1. This is the 64-bit version. Launching that brings up a very old-fashioned looking console where you can do your work. Now this is the way most people used R up until only a few years ago, until RStudio was released by J.J. Allaire and his company. That's what we'll be using for the rest of the class. This way you can see what life was like before RStudio came around.